Hi everyone. My name is Megan Anders. I'm the Behavioral Services Manager for the Frost School, and I also work at the Forbush School at Frederick County. And today I'm here to talk to you a little bit about reinforcement. I hope that you guys are all hanging in there during this kind of crazy pandemic situation. I know that distance learning is providing a lot of different challenges, particularly for maintaining motivation. So I just wanted to do this little video to talk a little bit about some of the different kinds of reinforcement systems that we use here through Sheppard Pratt, in the hopes that you guys can help some of your students maintain that motivation while they're working at home and they're doing all of their good distance learning work. So a couple of things before we get started. First, we'll be sending home a reinforcement inventory. So the purpose of that, it's just a Word document. It's a fillable document for you to complete and send back. But the hope is to help you guys identify some specific rewards that you can utilize that are highly preferred for your child to use during the distance learning. The purpose of isolating some specific rewards is that, if you have a reward that you're using that's just freely available throughout the day and you're asking them to do a lot of really challenging tasks, then they're not going to be as motivated to do what you're asking them to do, because they know that if you're using iPad as a reward, for example, and you have iPad available freely throughout the day, then they're not really going to work very hard to gain access to that iPad because they know they can just kind of get it for free. So figure out what those highly motivating rewards are going to be. If you need any assistance from the Frost School in gaining access to some of those reward options, just reach out to your program coordinator or your program's behavior specialist, and we can help figure out how to get you some of those rewards and get them sent out to you. The other thing is that you'll be getting sent this reinforcement training document that's going to outline everything that I talk about today, so you have some reference materials to refer back to if you get stuck. Also, if you need some additional assistance above and beyond this video, you can also reach out to your program's behavior specialist for some kind of specific consultations about any issues that you're running into. All right, so I think we're gonna jump right in. So what is positive reinforcement? Essentially, it's just kind of a fancy way of talking about rewarding your child for the good things that they're doing in the hopes that in the future they will continue doing that good thing. It's really hard to ask someone to do something that's not preferred, especially if you're not paying them anything. I know that as much as I love my job and as much as I love coming into work every day, I probably wouldn't do it for very long if my paycheck stopped coming, right? And I think it's probably the same for you guys, and it's the same thing for your students. If you don't pay them for what you're asking them to do, then they're really not going to be motivated to do it. So you need to make sure that you provide them with things that happen after they engage in something positive to ensure that it continues happening in the future. We know that, at the Frost School, our whole day is designed to provide positive reinforcement, and that's what your students are really used to receiving. So it's going to be really important that you maintain that use of positive reinforcement while you're at home and while you're doing the distance learning. So generally speaking, regardless of what reinforcement system you decide to use, you're going to want to make sure that you praise your child frequently. If you think about any kind of work project that you've done, if you've worked really hard on something and then you come to your supervisor at the end of that project and you're expecting some good feedback and they just say, "All right, nice job," they're not really enthusiastic about it, then you're not going to be really motivated to put in as much effort the next time you're asked to do something by that supervisor. So it's the same thing for your kids. Even if it's, something small and something simple, it's probably a big deal for them. So it's going to be really important that you provide a lot of really enthusiastic praise. So you're really excited about, delivering that praise. And you also want to be really specific. So you don't want to just say, "Good job." You want to tell them specifically what they did a good job at. So, good job cleaning up your dishes. good job vacuuming your room, good job sitting at your desk and completing all your math work. So let them know exactly what they did well, so they know to do that specific thing again in the future. So that is praise. Like I said, do it frequently, do it as close in time to whatever that good thing was, because again, if you praise someone at the end of the day for something that they did in the morning, it's not really as potent. It doesn't really mean as much as when you do it right there in the moment. They're going to remember it more. So praise, praise, praise. And then the first type of reinforcement system that I'm going to go over is the first then board. So it might look something like this. It's usually laminated. You can also use like a dry erase board. So you can just write first on the left, a little line down the middle, and then on the right. Okay, so you're just setting up the day with this specific contingency. First this, then this. So in the world of ABA, we call this the Premack principle, but it's just a fancy way for describing like grandma's rule. It's like, you know, you eat your peas and then you get your dessert. That's basically the idea behind it. There are a couple of considerations that you're going to want to take into account when you're using a first then board. You can run this consistently throughout the entire school day, but you want to make sure that the items that you're listing in your first then contingency are things that are like age appropriate, developmentally appropriate, and they're things that your child will be successful doing. So you could write something like, first clean your room, then you get 15 minutes of iPad. Now, if this is a skill that your child has done before and they've done it relatively proficiently, then this is fine. But odds are that your expectation of what a clean room looks like is going to probably be different than what your child's expectation is. So normally what you would want to do is break this down a little bit more, okay? So if you can break this task down, you probably should. So it could be something like, first make your bed. Then maybe 5 minutes on the iPad, okay? And then just break it down and continue to go step by step for whatever tasks that child needs to complete in order to satisfy cleaning their room. Other things that you can put on here would be something like, maybe if your child is asked to do a math worksheet, if it's developmentally appropriate, you could say, do your math worksheet, then you get 15 minutes of iPad. But if it's a really challenging task for your child, you might want to say, first do one math problem, then you get a Skittle. And then you just keep repeating that until they've completed that task. Hopefully over time, as they get to be more proficient with the tasks that you're asking them to do, then you can kind of like stretch out that reinforcement a little bit. So you could say, first do 3 math problems, then a Skittle. First do 4 math problems, then a Skittle, right? So you can kind of like stretch it out a little bit until they're able to complete more and more of the task. But like I said, this is a super easy, simple way to lay out your contingency throughout the day just by saying first this, then this. It's a nice little visual. You can use it to prompt your child if they start getting a little bit distracted. You can just point and say, remember, first this, then this, right? So that's your first reinforcement strategy, first then board. The next system, and I'm just gonna cross out the student's name so hopefully you can see it, is called a token board. All right, so it looks something like this. Token boards can be very different. You can have lots of different tokens on it. A standard token board usually has 5 tokens, but you can have as little as 3 tokens, as many as 20 tokens. It really doesn't matter. It just kind of depends on how long it's going to take that child to complete the task, and where they are developmentally. If you've got a younger kiddo, you probably want to have fewer tokens on it compared to an older student where you can get away with like more tokens. But essentially what you do is as soon as you sit down to the task, you ask the student what they would like to work for. So in this situation, our student is working for chips, but you can have all different kinds of options: scooter, cookie, pretzel, candy, whatever is available for them to earn, you can put it here on the back. If it's something that's not available at that time, like let's say iPad's not working, you don't want to have iPad there because obviously their hopes are going to get up and you're just going to disappoint them. So if something's not available, you just don't even have it as an option there. But in this situation, our student is working for chips, and that's totally fine. You also want to review the expectations for the behaviors that the student needs to demonstrate in order to earn these tokens. So you might say, all right, you're working for chips. You need to make sure that you keep your hands and feet to yourself, you follow directions, you have a quiet voice, and you complete your task, right? That's what they need to do in order to earn. It's very clear, it's very explicit, okay? So when you're starting, you start off with 0 tokens on the board. As soon as they demonstrate, that they're oriented to the task, they're sitting, they're like ready to learn, you start them off with some success. So you give them the very first token. Again, you're going to provide that very specific praise. So you let them know why they're getting that token. So you say, child of mine, great job sitting, being ready to learn. You get your first token. Okay, you can ask them to put it on, or they can put it on, whatever, it doesn't really matter. So they get their first token. Now again, how often you deliver those tokens is going to be dependent on your child's kind of developmental level, their age. If you have a younger student, developmentally speaking, you're going to deliver the tokens more frequently, as opposed to if you have an older student, or maybe it's a task or routine that they're really proficient in, you can probably space those tokens out a little bit more. But let's say for this situation, I'm going to be providing them with tokens maybe every 2 to 3 minutes throughout the task. Okay, so it might take them 10 to 15 minutes to earn the overall reward. Okay, so our student is working diligently. So 2 to 3 minutes have passed. I'm going to give them their next token and say, oh, child, you are doing a fantastic job working quietly. You get your next token. Okay, and then you just continue doing that until you get to your last token. Okay, and you say, oh, you've been working so hard. You've been safe. You've followed directions. You completed your task. You have been working quietly. You got 5 tokens. Now you can access your reward. Here are some chips. Okay, as soon as they get that last token, you want to deliver the reward right away. You can't give it to them like 30 minutes later. They can't like bank it or save it up for later. You just deliver that reward immediately. And then you just do the same thing over again. You say, okay, what would you like to work for now? They select the new thing. Maybe this time, maybe I'm gonna switch it up. I'm gonna work for scooter. They select scooter, and then you do the same thing over again. Go over the expectations of what they need to earn. You give them their first token for being ready to work, and then you just continue on. So let's say you're halfway through earning these tokens. They're doing a great job. And maybe they engage in kind of like a low level problem behavior. So maybe they get out of their seat, wander a little bit, or, they scream out and say, this is the hardest math assignment I've ever had. You're so stupid. Not a big deal. We don't want to overreact. We just provide some prompts to get them back on task. Don't really comment on the behavior, just focus back on what they need to be doing. Once they get back on task, you don't want to immediately deliver a token. You wait a couple of minutes, 1 to 2 minutes or so, and then you continue delivering tokens. So they're back on track, it's great. They get to the last token, they can still access the reward. It just took them a little bit longer to be able to access it, right? So you wait that little delay period after they get back on track, couple minutes, continue delivering reinforcers, and they get their reward. Okay, now let's say our student is halfway through earning and they engage in some kind of dangerous behavior, right? So maybe they slap you across the face. Hopefully not, but let's say maybe they do. Okay, again, you don't really comment too much on the behavior, you just redirect them back to the task that they need to be doing. Once they get back on track, you wait a sufficient delay period, so maybe 1 or 2 minutes, and then you continue delivering tokens. Okay, I like how you're back on track, you're working really hard. Now, you get to the end of the task. Instead of giving them that last token, you direct their attention to the token board and you just provide a really brief review of how they did during that time period and say, you know what, we weren't safe, but I do really like how you got back on track and you were working really hard. We didn't get to earn Scooter, but you can select a break option. Okay, so you clear the board and then you say, we'll try again next time. Okay, so maybe you give them a couple of minutes to access a break item. This should be something that's not super reinforcing, but they still get to take a little bit of a break from the task. And then once that break is over, then you start again and say, oh, you want to try to work again for Scooter? Okay, let's remember to be safe, blah, blah, blah. And then you put your, you start with your tokens, okay? So the reason for that is that we want to make sure that we're not inadvertently reinforcing dangerous behaviors. So we want to make it clear that that's an unacceptable behavior. That's not a way to earn a reward. So in that situation, they wouldn't earn the overall reward and you would just encourage them to try again for the next time, okay? So hopefully that's pretty clear. All right, now the last type of reinforcement system that we tend to use here at Frost is called a behavior report card system. And this is something that we use more often for our older students, students that are a little bit further along cognitively or developmentally speaking. And it usually looks something like this. It's usually just like a sheet of paper and it's got a couple of different columns. So on the very leftmost column, you have your time periods and your activities, whatever they may be. This one is more geared towards like a typical school day. You're gonna be mindful of how long those intervals will be. So it could be as little as 15 minutes, could be in 30-minute intervals, could be 45 minutes, but you really don't want to go past hour-long intervals. And the reason for that is that it's kind of hard to remember and keep track of all these behaviors across more than an hour. You're just probably going to forget what they did. So just think about how long your student can kind of maintain behaviors without being able to get feedback. If you're going to use a reinforcement system like this, you also want to think about whether or not your child can emotionally handle getting feedback about their behaviors. So if you have a kiddo who every time you give them feedback about their behavior, they just kind of melt down, like they can't handle it, then this is probably not going to be a very good reinforcement system for them. But if you have a child that developmentally can go a longer period of time without getting really frequent in the moment reinforcement, and they can emotionally handle getting this kind of feedback, then this might be a good system for you to use. So like I said, you've got the time periods, selecting whatever equal intervals you want to use, whether it's 30 minutes, 40 minutes, what have you. And then you're going to list the activity that they're expected to be doing during that time. And then across the top columns, you're going to list out those behavioral expectations that they're expected to exhibit in order to earn a reward during that time interval. So it could be safe towards others, polite interactions, following directions, staying in their area, staying on task, etc. You probably want to pick between 3 to 5 behaviors. You don't want like 14 because again, you're not going to be able to track like 14 different things that they're doing. And then you have a column to say whether or not they earned their reward. So when you come to the beginning of this academic block, let's say it's time for English, you're going to go over the behavioral expectations. So child, remember during English, you need to be safe, be polite, follow directions, so on and so forth. And then when you get to the end of that interval, then you just review it with them. You say, okay, you were safe towards others, yes or no, polite, yes or no, etc., and go through all the behaviors. If they exhibited the appropriate behavior across the board, then they can earn a reward. So again, if it's a longer period of time, they should access a reward that's a little bit bigger. You want it to be comparable to the amount of work that they put in during that time. So it could be like 10 minutes of an activity, whatever is appropriate for you at home. If during this time they engaged in a problem behavior, so let's say they were not polite during that interval, maybe they cursed, then you would say, oh, you were safe towards others, you weren't polite, you cursed at me, so you will get an N for that column. You were following directions, you stayed in your area, and you stayed on task. Unfortunately, we can't earn your reward during this period, but you can access a break option and you can try again next time. So you just leave it at that. You don't engage in a lot of back and forth conversations and negotiations about it. You just leave it at that, and then you move on to the next interval. Okay, so that is your behavioral rating system. It's pretty straightforward. You want to avoid like threatening them with loss of points in the moment. You don't want to say, oh, well, now you're not going to earn, because then you're just going to spiral from there. You just want to try to keep it as positive as you can, and try to encourage them to do their best. And then when it's the end of that interval, you just move on. You don't dwell on it. You just keep it rolling. Like I said, your child will be pretty familiar with these different kinds of systems. If you're not sure which system you should use, you should reach out to your program coordinator or behavior specialist, and they can help you figure out which one would be best for you guys. If you have any questions, like I said, feel free to reach out, and we hope that this helps you guys during this challenging time. I hope you guys hang in there. All the best. Bye.